So what I want to discuss now is the literature review. So I think it's very important as part of when you're doing your research to really review your literature as you're doing your research. What is a literature review? A literature review it does the following. First, it situates your research focus within the context of a wide academic community in your field. Remember, as you are doing research, you are researching, on a subject. You are researching on something, and whatever you are researching, you need to really make sure you understand. You have a full understanding of the topic which you are reading. So it reports critical review of relevant literature. It identifies a gap within that literature that your research will attempt to address. So the purpose of doing a literature review, you want to really know what is known about the topic which you are studying. In this case, when you want to know what is really known about the topic which you are studying and what is knowledge gap. Usually it depends with the level of research, but usually when you are doing higher level research, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for you to also do a research to research on things which are already known. So most of the research at higher level, in most cases, they are based on actually, you need to first read, what other studies have been done, what is known about your topic, if it's about risk factors, what is known about the risk factors, has this study been done and been done somewhere? What other risk factors, have not been studied? So for you, usually when you're doing a research, in most cases, when you're doing a research at higher level, we are doing research to, you really need to understand your topic, but you want to know the knowledge gap. These are the areas which are not known. That's where you want to focus. But usually when you are doing a research at lower level, like most of you, the concept is for you really to really learn the research process, not like really trying to address a knowledge gap, but to understand the concept. So your literature review is more of really understanding, the subject, understanding the definition, understanding the studies which have been done locally and globally. But remember, the last point is very important. A literature review, it identifies gaps within a literature that your research will attempt to address. If a research has been done and more is known about that subject, in most cases, it is really not necessary in most cases to do research. What are the stages in when you are doing literature review? Remember, most of the research, they are based on a problem. So the first thing is you need to formulate. You need to and the first stage, you need to have your topic which you are studying. So that's the problem formulation. So which topic or field is being examined and what are its components and issues? You do your literature search. That's where you're finding materials relevant to the subject being explored. After you explore the materials, you evaluate. Um, remember, as you search your literature, you're going to see so many documents. You're going to see books, you're going to see articles, you're going to see other research or other research done by other students, either at PhD or an undergraduate. But you then need to evaluate those researches to see which of those research are useful for your literature review. But how many of those will really contribute in terms of your topic? Then after analyzing, your resources, you then analyze and interpret, um, the materials which you then chose to make sure they are part of they are part of your literature review. And how do you do this? You then write your literature review where you are discussing, these findings and the conclusion from these articles which you have chose to put as part of your literature review. Then why do I need to do a literature review? Remember, someone reading your research project will not just assume that your research is a good idea. You need to persuade them that it is relevant and that it is worth doing. They will ask questions like, what research questions are you asking? Why are you asking those research? Has anyone else done anything similar? Is your research relevant to practice, theory, or research in your field? What is already known or understood about this topic? How might your research aid to this understanding or challenge existing theories and beliefs? This is very important. Remember, as I said, in most cases, when you are doing research at higher level, most people ask us, what is really, what is your contribution on whatever and on whatever research which you have done? So it is very critical, for your literature review to make sure that whatever as you present it, as you read it, actually it kind of really contributes to understanding of the subject in which you'll be studying. I think it's just a repetition of some of the issues. What are the purpose of literature review? It places your work in the context of its contribution to understand the research problem. It describes the relationship of, of work to others under consideration. Remember, as you do your literature research, you are telling us what other researchers have done. So you are linking your work with other researchers. You identify new ways to interpret prior research. You review any gaps on what has been done and what is not known. You try to resolve conflicts. If there are several studies which have been done looking into one issue, as you write your review, you also try to resolve these conflicts or those differences between studies which have been done. You also need to identify areas of prior scholarship to prevent duplication of effort. Remember, as I said, if something has been done, in most cases, there's no need for you to also repeat it. But usually this applies to literature research at a higher level. Then point the way in fulfilling a need for additional research. Locate your research within the context of existing literature. Before you do your literature review, one thing which is important is the source of your literature review. Where you are going to get what are the sources of information which you're going to use as you write your literature review. There are a lot of these literature reviews. We can use what we call anthologies, blogs, conference papers, journals or research articles, lectures, letters, meetings, newsletters, newspapers, reports, seminars, textbooks, other research project, thesis or dissertation or tweets. Then remember, when you're doing research as a student, one thing you need to understand is it's more scientific. It's scientific. So you also, as you're doing your research, you need to make sure what you read is also scientific. So try to focus your sources of literature to things which are scientific. We have tried to put some of those key things in italics. Things like conference papers, Conferences, that's where other researchers meet and they discuss scientific things. So citing those things in your literature review is also, and it is good. Other research done by other researchers is also good. Lectures, yes, you can quote them, but things like letters, meetings, newsletters, or newspapers, we don't usually recommend them in this for when you're writing. When you're, you can use them. Yes, that's perfect. But for research, which is academic, focus on things like reports, seminars, textbooks, or other research projects which have been done by other people. Tweets, I've idolized this. Yes, you can use some of the tweets, but I think it's not something recommended here. As I said, when you're doing research is scientific. So what you need to quote and use as your sources, they should also be usually, materials which are also scientific. Social media, some of these things, yeah, if you're really sure whatever you're quoting, then it makes sense. But let's avoid to use those things in for literature. Then there's a much talk about using internet to get to get you know to get sources. These days, the internet is like the this the bigger the a huge source for most of these things. Most of the conference papers, the journals, the lectures, the reports, seminars, textbooks, they are available on the internet. And how do you access it? This can be accessed through Google. And you can use the general Google where you can just type whatever you type, then whatever you, depending on your topic, you search, then you can get the articles. But there are two types of Google, and there's another Google which is called Google Scholar. Google Scholar is more academic and more scientific. So if you are looking for academic things, you are writing a research, usually it's advisable to to go into Google Scholar as opposed to using the ordinary Google. There are other several databases where you can get scientific material. One of the common one is what we call PubMed. So if you just go on Google and you search Google Scholar on PubMed, you will see, you'll be directed to some of these things where you can get things to use for your literature. So, but one of the things most people really make when they go on Google, or usually Google, they just type a word, whatever they're typing. Maybe they're doing a research about returnees, for the example which we are using. You just type returnees, what, and so many things will come out. So you need to look now in terms of you need to to sift, to select now. You have typed the words of the research which you are doing on Google. You need to sift, to select and see whatever is coming. Is it, as I said, Google will give you conference papers, journals, lecturers, books, textbooks, what, and you need to sift, and make sure what you choose are scientific articles, and avoid, taking things like tweets, newspapers, letters, whatever, because Google will give you anything. But if you're using Google Scholar, it will give you things which are more scientific. When you're writing a literature review, what is important, and a literature review, one should include the following: an overview of the subject, issue, or theory under consideration, along with objectives of the literature review, division of work under review into themes or categories. E.g., and for example, you don't just write your literature review in a continuous. You can really write your literature review based on the themes or the objectives of your research, which you'll be using. Then, as you write your literature review, you should include an explanation of how each work is similar to and how it varies from other studies. Then each literature review should always have a conclusion. Now, where you are really, you are reading materials from different people, from this person, this person, this person. But at the end of the day, you need to tie all those, and you need to tie all those issues so that you have one message which will be coming out from your literature, from your literature review. In terms of the structure of a literature review, you can structure your literature review in several, and you can use several formats when you're writing a literature review. But generally, when you're writing a structure, a literature review, usually it is your introduction, and this is where you start. Then you have got your body now. That's where you're putting the issues which you're discussing. Then you have a conclusion. But when you're structuring your body, you can use a chronological structure. And this is usually chronological structure, it applies. Let's say whatever you want to research is a sequence of steps or sequence of events, and you can actually review your literature based on those events so that you can actually show the order. But the commonest way which we structure literature review is based on the thematic structure or the objectives. So if this is useful if there are strands within your topic, you can consider each separately before bringing them together. So in most of the cases, the way we structure our objectives, you can also structure your objectives, your literature review based on on the themes or objectives, where each objective can have its paragraph or can have its section within the literature review. It also depends if your literature review is based on sector. You can also really structure your literature review based on maybe they are saying maybe it's political practice, whatever, geographical, depending on whatever classification your objectives are classified. So you can use any of those to structure your literature review, or you can combine these things. You can use the chronological order if they are events or thematic. But what is important, you just need to make sure your literature review is organized in a structured manner. When you are writing your literature review, the task of shaping a logical and effective literature review is challenging. Some guidance on how to write literature review as follows. And Good one, it should be framed by research questions. It must be related to your study. It must be clear to the reader where it is going. And it is keep signposting. And the signposting, it shows when you're writing, you're putting some order or some sequence, and it's so that people, they know I'm starting from here, going to G, going to there. Be in control, and whatever you're writing, be selective, and then as you write your literature review, as you be writing your literature review, you need to be citing. You need to be what? To be citing. You need to be what? To be citing. So these two things, citing as you write. Let's say I'll give an example. I'm not most people don't understand the difference between these two. And when you are citing, let's take for example, you have got this statement. We have got these statements, but these things, they're discussed in detail in a lecture, academic writing, where we discuss how do you write a reference list and how do you cite. But citing, I'll give you an example. For example, let's take, for example, this statement. Let's say you're writing your literature review. This statement, you got it in something. So by citing, you're writing, for example, where you got where you got where you're getting the author and the year of that statement. That's citing. And that's citing. In a statement, if you put a statement as you write, what do? You then put, you can put a statement to show the source of this is what citation. Then at the end, for page when you what literature review, you can have your literature review where you're now writing, your article to say this was from Richard Makuruminze. That was the name of the author. Richard Makuruminze, whatever. The name of the title or the research was quarantines, whatever, risk factors for quarantine, whatever. That was the title, blah, 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 blah. Then it was published in maybe it was a newspaper, it was in the Herald. That's where it was published. Then it was in Harare, Zimbabwe. So remember, this one, you are citing as you write, and you are citing as you write. But at the end of you write, you have a reference list where you are going to to put a reference of all the, and in the text you write this way, but at the end you are going to have a reference, a reference list where you list all the reference which you are using to write. This one, as I said, we have a separate lecture which discusses how do you write, so these concepts are very important for you to understand. When you are writing, you have got in-text, and you have got in-text citation, and you have got a referencing list. What are the common mistakes you need to avoid when you're writing a literature review? sources in a literature review do not clearly relate to the research problem. This is very common. And whatever you're citing, you're writing your topic is about quarantine centers. But if you look at what you are citing is not relevant. So make sure whatever you cite is what is not relevant. You do not take sufficient time to define and identify the most relevant sources to use. Very common, where people don't use the correct sources, relies exclusively on secondary analytical sources rather than including relevant primary research. So this is very important. You need to do as you write your literature review, you need to use other researches which have been done by others, as opposed to using information which has been reported by others based on other researches. You just need to focus on the actual researches. Then so many of these things. But one of the things which I realized is the last point. This is very common, where people use outdated references and or research references. Now you need to make sure your references or your literature things which you are using, they are recent. We are writing a research in 2020, but if you look at some of your sources, maybe they are for 1999 or they are 1980 or somewhere there. It's not allowed. And in most cases, when you're writing an article, whatever you should cite within your research should be within 5 years or so. And within 5 years of, so which means if you're doing a research in 2020, at least 2015, 2016, somewhere there, not to have a research in 2020, but what you are reporting but your references there from 2020. This is very important. As you do your works, as you write your as you write your references. Then it does not describe the search procedure that you are using in identifying literature. This one is, at some level you may need to tell people how you got your literature. Then uncritically accepting other researchers' findings and interpretations as valid, rather than examining all aspects of the research design and analysis critically. So you need to critically, and you don't just read, just say things as they are. As you write your literature review, you also need to critically, analyze these things, and you give your opinion on it, not just assuming whatever has been written is what is valid. Only includes research that validates assumptions, that does not consider contrary findings or alternatives, where just you are biased. You're just focusing on things which you want to hear. If a research has been done somewhere, say it. This research has been done. They've also found these things to be like this, like this, like this, like this, and this. So you don't need to hide some of the things, because So be open. What has been done, what has been found. You need to make sure all these things, they are clear. You mention them, so that you don't have to hide or only bring out information which you are interested in. So I think in general, in summary, this is like the really why we do literature review. What are the stages which we use? Why do we need to do literature review? What is the purpose of literature review? And the sources, and this is very important. How do you write your literature review? And the structure, how you structure your literature review is also very important. And when you're writing, what are the issues you need to consider? This is very important. Good, how do you cite in text? And good, after a statement which you have taken from someone, you really cite this, and how then do you then list these things as your reference list at the end of your article? This issue is very, as I said, there's a lecture on academic writing where we discuss these issues in detail, where we discuss issues of how do you paraphrase, how do you cite, and issues of plagiarism. They're very important when you're doing your research. Copying from other people without citing is an academic fraud. So you need to really make sure you understand these things. Then the common mistakes, I think we've discussed, which you need to avoid. So then now we go back to our example, and just to give, let's take for our example, which we've been using of COVID-19 among returnees. Let's say you want to write the literature review for this example, how would you do it? Just to a recap of our objectives, we want to determine demographic factors that might be contributing to returnees getting infected with COVID-19 in quarantine centers. We want to assess environmental factors. We want to identify social factors. We want to establish economic factors that are contributing to returnees getting. One of the ways which we discussed here in terms of structuring your literature review is you structure it by thematic and by themes based on your objectives, and where you what are the issues which you want to address based on your objectives. You can actually address your literature review based on the theme. So in this case, we can use our objectives which we have for demographic, environmental, social, and economic factors to structure our literature review. This is an example. We can have our introduction where we are introducing our topic. Then we can have paragraphs where we'll be looking at demographic factors, where we are looking now other studies which have been done looking into factors contributing to returnees getting infected. What other studies have shown in terms of demographic factors? So we can have first section looking into demographic factors, another section looking into environmental factors, other studies which have been done showing environmental factors causing people to get COVID, social factors, and economic factors. So these are our main objectives which we want to do. Remember, the purpose of literature review in most of the cases, we would like, in most cases, before you frame your variables, and remember, if you remember from what we are discussing above, the purpose of literature review is to see what has been done and what other studies have been done and what has been found and what are the knowledge are the knowledge gaps. You can use your literature review actually to find your variables. Remember, if you remember in the method section where we discussed variables for you to consider, it means you can think some of the variables from the head, but in most cases, before you really decide on some of those variables, you need to see what other people, if studies have been done by other people regarding what they found as risk factors or as factors contributing causing whatever issue you are looking into. You can, as you read, you will see other studies they found in quarantine centers, people they get risk of infection. What are the sex factors? What are the environmental factors? What are the social factors? What are the economic factors? You can then use these factors which you found from your literature review. You can also include some of them in your variables, which you can then use to remember. You use your variables, they are based on your objectives. Then from the variables, you then use your variables to develop your questionnaire. So your questionnaire development will be based on your variables. Then one thing which you can include in your literature review, this one is an option, and you can include it, or you might not. You might include it or not include it. But this is what you call a conceptual framework or a theory, and usually this conceptual framework or theory, what it means is as you study as you do your literature review, it is very important for you to find the relationship between your variables, and it is important to kind of have some theory or some framework which links and which shows the relationship between your variables and your outcome. So in this case, your variables are demographic, and your categories of variables. You've got your demographic, environmental, social, and economic. And your outcome, in this case, is getting infected and in quarantine centers. So somehow, you might need to come up with a theory, or if there's a study which has been done, or some framework, which really shows what is the relationship, what is the relationship between these factors and getting COVID infection. Maybe you can, if you're lucky, you can see maybe someone has already done, this study, and they've, come up with a framework or a diagram or whatever, or a relationship which shows the relationship between these two and the risk of getting coronavirus. So you can develop your own, hey, your own framework depending on the way you understand the relationship between these things, or you can use something which is already existing, which other researchers have done and shown good. If you combine this and this and this and this, it will then give you what COVID-19 infection. So in most cases, you can write this as a diagram where you are linking now. You want to show your relationship between between your objectives or your categories of your objectives and the outcome. This one is optional, and if you want to do it, then that's perfect. But if you want to do it, it's okay. But if you can't do it, then it's okay. Then afterwards, you can have your conclusion, where you're concluding, your conclusion. So this one becomes your introduction. Then this from there is your what? It's your body entity. Then these things, your intro and your what? And your conclusion. I have seen people when they are writing their literature review, they say introduction is fine, you can write, conclusion you can write, but they say body. It's not like really you have to write body. This is no. It just your body now. You can then split your body into sub, into sub what and into sub into themes or categories, which you can then use to really split your body. So you don't have to write body, but you then write, the subtitles of your body. So I think this should assist you, hey, in writing your literature review, uh, based on what we've been writing. But remember, at your level, you are really, it's more of like defining issues, writing what others have found, as risk factors or whatever is contributing to whatever you're studying. Yes, you might need to show the innovation or showing what is not known or whatever, but that is a bit complex. In terms of the conceptual framework or theory, you can put it here if your topic is easy or you really understand it. But if you don't understand the concept, there's no harm in not really writing that. Otherwise, this is the end of the talk.